these motets are very beautiful, but they don't sound as maybe insofar as his requiem or his mass are radical in a church music in a traditional church music context. These sound less sort of distinctively. I mean, they are modern, but they don't sound as sort of obviously impressionistic, for instance. So, what do you think is the difference between these and the the orchestral masses in the context of sacred music style and history?
Yeah. So the masses, the Requiem Mass and the Miscommuto were meant to be occasional pieces, right? And maybe even, as we've said, maybe even concert pieces,
Mm-hmm.
um, with all of the time for preparation and everything else that would entail. I think not a lot of details are known about the genesis of the four motets. So this is my, these are my opinions. I think these are more intended to be kind of everyday pieces, like war horses in a choir's repertoire. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
One thing that I've never seen there in all the writings about Duruflé and his works, there's a lot of guessing about where liturgically these motets might fit, and they're educated guesses and they're good guesses, and they're the guesses that I had too up until about 6 years ago, when I started again working in the traditional mass at a traditional parish, which has only masses and liturgies in the usus antiquor. Um, those four pieces, those quatre motets, I'm sure are from Benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. Um, so I'd grown up going to Benediction and playing for Benediction, certainly. In the Novus Ordo, usually that's a pretty simple benediction with an O Salutaris, Tantum Ergo. But in its traditional form, its benediction of the Blessed Sacrament is quite extended. So it would start with a Eucharistic piece, um, and Ubi Caritas is that it fits the bill, and especially in France, I've seen it used as that opening Eucharistic hymn. Where we often use O Salutaris in this country, the Ubi
Oh, very
Caritas
interesting.
fits that. Then there's a Marian chant, and so in those four motets, we have the Tota Pulchra S for three women's voices. And there's a Petrine chant in traditional benediction, which is often Tuus Petrus, which is the text that Duruflé set. And then, of course, um, the chant, which is De Rigueur, which is required for a benediction of the Blessed Sacrament, the Tantum Ergo, which he sets so beautifully. So I think he must have. I'm so grateful for this experience in the traditional mass, so that I can see, oh yes, he intended it for that. And so benediction, of course, would be sung quite often in France during, in Duruflé's day. And so this could have been an integral part of the choir's repertoire. And then, of course, these motets could have done double duty, as you say, the Ubi Caritas, anytime, but certainly Holy Thursday. The Tota Pulchras on any Marian feast, the Tuus Petrus, and perhaps on the feast day of June 29th, and so on. So they're eminently usable. And I think that's why they're more accessible, for lack of a better term, in terms of relative ease of preparation, although the Tuus Petrus is not easy, and some parts of the other motets are not. Tota Pulchras is not easy. But certainly, relatively speaking, more approachable for musicians than the two masses.
And what would you say about the motets in relation to, insofar as they are more functional pieces of of liturgical music? How do they connect to the developments in liturgical music, and particularly the church's guidance in liturgical music in the time of and just before Duruflé's lifetime?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So, for Duruflé, the real galvanizing point, and for church musicians of that time, for serious liturgical musicians of that time, um, the, the 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 catalytic moment was the motu proprio of St. Pius X in 1903, Tra le sollecitudini, the motu proprio in church music, um, which was really, today it seems, quotidian to us. There's nothing really surprising to us in it, but at the time it was really revolutionary. And it really attempted to effect a unification of church music, to achieve a universality of Roman Catholic church music through the use of the newly revised chant, which was being produced at Salim. So their Salim comes in again. Um, the directives included, using, of course, chant primarily in the liturgical services, not using, operatically inspired music. Another directive was that, the closer that a new composition adhered to the spirit of Gregorian chant, the holier it would be. There were these conditions of holiness, Catholicity, universality, which were espoused in that document. And
Was the spirit of the Gregorian chant defined at all in that document?
Well, no, and so
would that be mainly serving the text and not stirring up the passions too much, or something like that?
Well, this is, of course, like matter of intense debate now, and has been for some time, because that spirit of Gregorian chant is almost like the quote unquote spirit of Vatican II. Is right? It's difficult to define that, but I think you just put your finger on. I mean, for those who will reflect on that, so that I think for musicians that would mean even melodically, there's diatonic melodies, which form the Gregorian chant as codified at Salim. The sort of peaceful, calm, tranquil nature of the performance practice, for lack of a better term, which was espoused by Salim. And so there we see it in those four motets of Duruflé. And I do think, I've never seen anywhere that those motets were a direct response to that motu proprio in subsequent documents from the Vatican. But I think in his mind, they must have been. So, they use the chant of the church. They are mostly, there's a lot of homophony. That is, there's voices moving together, proclaiming the text at the same time, so that it's immediately intelligible to the listener.
You mean they're like not overlapping rhythmically as part of that, right?
Right. Not for the most part. There is some of that sort of polyphonic setting I'm thinking of, in the Tote Pulchra S, but still it's fairly limited. So yes, I think that was, in addition to setting the pieces, quite simply, as it were, in his own style, to be practical, there's also that response to the motu proprio.
Right. Well, I think in much of Duruflé's organ and choral music, there is a real tranquility. Not to say there is some drama in the masses, but but there's also, if you'll forgive the phrase, a noble simplicity, to the motets, especially the Ubi Caritas, the chant melody is readily identifiable, for instance, and yet it gains so much by how he harmonizes it very beautifully and recontextualizes it again with different keys and things like that, like you were saying with the beginning of the Requiem.